Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. This is Irene and my DIY life diaries. Christmas without a fireplace just doesn't feel complete. But what if you don't have one at home? The solution is to fake it, of course. There are dozens of tutorials on YouTube and on the web about how to make a fireplace out of wood, but as for me, I really don't have space for a fireplace sitting there all year round, and I wanted to have something easily removable, more like a festive decoration that you can put away after Christmas, and something very easy to build and very cheap. So today I'll be showing how to make a fireplace, and a very realistic one with no wood at all. So let's get started. I've decided to make a fireplace out of XPS insulation foam board. This is a very light and inexpensive material. You can find it at a local hardware store. I'm using here 3 boards, 24 by 48 and 8/10 of an inch thick for the fireplace. And of course I'm beginning with cutting out all the parts. As always, I'll leave the cutting plan and the entire template in the description box below the video. By the way, you can use it for a fireplace made of plywood or particle board, of course adjusted a little for the thickness of the material. I'm cutting all the parts, trying to make the cut as vertical as possible. I'm using a metal plank for that purpose. I'm beginning the assembly with the firebox. It consists of 4 parts, a backing, an inner crossbar and 2 inner sides. I'm hot gluing everything into place. The following pieces are the 2 base columns. Each of them consists of 3 identical parts. I'm hot gluing the sides to the front part from above so that there are no seams from the front. In order to save some material, I haven't made the backing for the columns. I'm just hot gluing smaller pieces of foam board to the back to reinforce the structure. I'll also add some cardboard here later for extra strength. The upper part of the fireplace consists of a top, a front panel and 2 sides. I'm hot gluing the sides onto the top. I've drawn where to install them in advance to have a kind of guide. They are to be glued 2 inches from the edge. And I'm hot gluing the front panel after that. The lower part of the fireplace looks exactly the same as the upper part. A top, a front panel and 2 sides. It is lower and deeper than the top part. And here I'm also gluing the sides onto the top first, 1 inch from the edge. I'm also hot gluing a reinforcer into the lower part, and later I'll additionally reinforce it with cardboard like the columns. I'm adding overlays to the lower part of the columns. These are rectangles, 3 by 8 inches. I need 6 pieces like that, and I'm cutting them out of some leftovers of my foam boards. If you like a kind of more classic style, you can also replace these parts with some white base molding. It will look nice too. I've also decided to add a crown molding to the fireplace upper part. I've bought a foam crown molding of a suitable size. It is 1.5 by 2 3/4 inches. First, I'm attaching the molding to the top and marking where it will be so that later when gluing I can immediately see if it has settled to place as it should. Then I'm cutting the molding, at first just making the pieces of the required length. And then I'm cutting the molding at 45 degrees. Here I was very afraid to screw it up because I've forgotten the miter box in the country and have to cut it by eye. But in the end it turned out almost okay. After some adjusting and fitting, I'm hot gluing the molding below the top. I'll also trim the bottom part with molding. This time it is a narrow trim. This trim was much easier to handle because it is straight and narrow. I'm attaching it to a top to hold straight and cutting along the markings on my cutting mat. and I'm hot gluing the trim to the edge of the bottom part. This provides a more finished look and at the same time masks the edge that is not very neat. The bottom part is ready. I'm hot gluing the columns to it 1 inch from the edge of the top. Here I'm not taking into account the trim. And I'm hot gluing the upper part of the fireplace to the columns. There I've also pre-marked the 2-inch overlap. When making the template, I've forgotten to take into account the gap between the front panel and the firebox. I'm hot gluing a strip of foam board about 2 inches wide here. Then I'm going to be working on the firebox. According to my idea, there will be brickwork inside. I'm cutting the bricks out of corrugated cardboard. A whole brick size is 8 by 1 3/4 inches and a half brick, respectively, is 4 by 1 3/4 inches. I've selected here the same size of the brick as I've got on our faux brick wall. And here I'll need 9 whole bricks and 26 halves for the whole firebox. I'm also cutting the corners of the finished bricks with scissors to make them a bit rounded. And I'm pressing the edges of the future bricks. The corrugation here becomes flatter and the brick turns out to be a little flatter along the edges. This is not very noticeable in fact, but let it be. After that, I'm hot gluing the bricks all over the firebox. I've pre-lined the insides to have a guide when attaching them and making sure they have the same seam width. I'm making each seam half an inch wide, just like those I have on the wall. Of course, for now my brickwork is far from any real one, but wait for a couple of minutes, they'll change completely, I promise. Then I begin working on the seams. I'm using here some leftover putty. This is actually wood filler and I've added some black and a bit of brown acrylic paints here to get a cement gray color. You can also use white or colored putty and then paint the seams, but I think that mixing the color right away is much quicker. I'm rubbing the putty with my finger into all the seams. I'm trying to cover the foam board completely here. And I'm also rubbing some putty into the edges of the cardboard to hide them and rubbing over the bricks a little too. They'll have a kind of uneven texture and look more like a real brick, but don't be too thorough, the cardboard should still be visible. And I'm also smearing a little of the putty over the surface of the whole fireplace. Here I have picked a white putty because I'm going to paint the fireplace in a light color. All in all, for both the firebox and the rest of the fireplace, 1 package of putty is enough. You can also just paint the fireplace with textured paint of some kind. Well, I decided to do it like this, using putty and some leftover paint. After the fireplace has dried, it dries very quickly. I've remembered that it needs to be reinforced, since we were saving foam boards to fit all the details into 3 sheets, and the fireplace turned out to be very light and, to be honest, a bit flimsy. I've gathered some packaging cardboard from our IKEA kitchen. These are thick pieces, but some pieces of ordinary corrugated cardboard. Any boxes of suitable size will also do here. The main thing is to glue in more reinforcers and fill the bottom of the fireplace with cardboard to make it more stable. After the putty on the bricks has dried well, I'm painting them. I'm using a couple of terracotta shades here. I'm painting the bricks mostly in the darker color. In some places I'm adding strokes of the second shade, which is lighter. In some places, vice versa, making the whole brick light and then adding dark strokes. And I'm trying to blend both colors while the paint is still wet to get more or less smooth ombre effect and not just color spots. You can also paint all the edges of the bricks in a darker color, then make the middle of the bricks lighter and add a couple of dark strokes over the top. The main thing is to create a kind of non-uniformly painted surface like on a real brick wall where all the bricks are never the same color. Don't worry if somewhere it turned out to be not very neat or if the strokes turned out too much because you haven't blended well. All this will soften a little after you finish the next steps. So I'm waiting for the paint to get dry and then I'm going to be using a dark brown color. I'm dry brushing all the bricks in brown. This will slightly calm down the bright terracotta and will make the bricks a little bit darker, and at the same time the texture of the surface will become more visible. Well, and it will also soften those color transitions and will make the overall look more natural. After the brown, I'm taking the white paint and dry brushing the bricks again. Here, as you can see, I'm not moving along or across the bricks, but slightly diagonally. This works best for accentuating the edges of the bricks and making an even layer of paint. Now the bricks are looking just like real ones. It is time to attach the firebox to the fireplace. My firebox is a little bit smaller than the opening for it, so I'm hot gluing some thin pieces of foam into the lower part of the columns in order to place the firebox evenly. And then I'm hot gluing the firebox into the opening. I'm adding the same pieces of foam to the middle and upper parts of the columns so that everything is connected tightly. All that is left is to finish the opening between the firebox and the fireplace. Here I'm also using the molding. This one is wide and flat. I think it's a base molding. I'm measuring the size of the opening and cutting the molding to the required length. Here again I'm cutting using the markings on my cotton mat. I also have to cut out rectangles in the trim where I've cut the overlays at the columns. The overlays are 3 inches high and 3/4 inches thick, respectively. I'm cutting out pieces of the same size from the side parts of the trim. Ready. Now I'm hot gluing the trim into the gap between the firebox and the fireplace. Isn't the brickwork looking kind of strange, framed by an unpainted form? All that is left is to reinforce the top so that it is more sturdy, as I'm going to put some decor over it. I've had a few pieces of laminate floor leftovers after the repair, and my husband has cut them for me to fit the size of the top. Here I'll make it look like an old cracked board. The pieces had been cut off a bit crookedly, but it is even a good thing. For me, it is looking more like real wood. In this case, I'm using what I have. You can also reinforce the top with some thick cardboard and decorate with adhesive vinyl or paint it and trim the edge with thin molding, just as I did on the lower top. I will also glue small pieces of this flooring over the edges of the top. Of course, the joints on the sides and the gap between the two pieces of flooring should be hidden somehow, otherwise it doesn't look like an old wooden board at all. So I'm taking my grey painted putty again and adding some brown and black paint to it to get a shade that is more or less close to my flooring color. I can't say that it turned out to be super similar, it is rather having the color of milk chocolate, but for my purposes this will do. I'm filling in all the seams with the putty. I'm using my finger for this, and then I'm removing the excess with a damp cloth. After that, I'm leaving the fireplace to sit until the putty dries properly. After all, in order to make the putty look like wood, at least a little, I'm adding long brush strokes over the surface, first with grey paint, and then I'm mixing a light brown color close to the main color of the flooring and also making long like strokes of brown paint over the top. And And finally, the top layer is a white paint thinned with water. I'm applying it to the surface and immediately wiping it with a cloth. I'm getting a grayish haze over the top. It softens all the imperfections and provides the effect of an aged grey wood. All that is left is to paint the fireplace itself. Here I'm using some paint leftovers. This is a very light grey color. It looks almost white on camera. I'm painting the fireplace in 2 layers to cover the yellow color of the foam well. After that, I looked at the result and realized that I don't like it. This even color didn't go with the old brickwork in the firebox and the old cracked board above. I had to do something, and I decided to tint the fireplace to make the color more complex. For sure I'll get some comments that this is too complicated for an annual decoration, but if I want the project to turn out as intended, I'm quite ready to spend an extra hour to perfect it. You can use the technique I'll show or just paint the finished thing, it's up to you. So, first I'm taking a grey color and I'm dry brushing the entire surface of the fireplace. I'm highlighting the surface and all the edges. The next layer is a brown color. Here I'm using taupe, a color close to coffee with milk. Doesn't look very good at this stage, does it? And I'll tell you, don't show a half-finished work to anyone. After the brown paint, it's time for white. I'm applying all the layers one by one. They do not have time to dry well, and therefore the white paint is kind of blurring the surface. The dark shades seem to dissolve a little, and all the colors are blending so that the overall look changes at once. It looks like a stone surface now. If I have too much dark paint in some places, I'm applying here several layers of the white, lightening this place until I like the resulting shade. And all that is left is to decorate the new mantle. I cannot believe how good it turned out. It is so real looking. If you don't have a real fireplace at home, this is a great option, I think. It's so nice and festive, looking so warm and cozy, though not providing any real heat. You can put Christmas stockings on and decorate it. I like to put a large pine garland over the top. It is also looking great with some Christmas village and candles. And this is where Santa's gonna come. I've added some smaller logs into the firebox and have thrown fairy lights inside, but I also really like the faux fireplaces with lots of candle inside. Of course, you cannot put any real candles here for obvious reasons, but I'm going to order electric ones. As soon as they arrive, I'm going to replace my logs with candles. So I hope you liked my mantle, my Faux Fireplace, guys. Please let me know what you think about it down below. Thanks for watching this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye!